Are you ready to go, son?
I am ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, the American take on Formula One, and we are back after Bahrain. Things for our podcast went sort of like a day at the office for Charles Leclerc. Everything went wrong. And we never really had a chance, but we are back on track, son. We just finished watching the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Shocker. Max wins. Red Bull wins. I know. But he was the first repeat winner for this newer Grand Prix, but that's now 9 in a row. I tell you, Patrick, I had a chance. People don't know this, but years ago I had a chance to buy the publishing rights to the Dutch national anthem. I seriously regret that. Though I think the big story is not the 9 in a row or Max repeating. I think the big story is someone handed the keys of a Ferrari to an 18-year-old. And not only did he not crash it, he did a damn fine job. I think we also found out that those who do not belong in F1 do not belong in F1 and should not be in F1. Son, what's your big takeaway from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix?
I think all of those combined, second race of this season, we're off to a fun, albeit predictable start to this season. One of my biggest takeaways from the Saudi Grand Prix is that this is the track that I wanted in Miami. I was watching it. It's right along the Red Sea, right on the coast. These high concrete walls on this slick sort of road track combination. It's fun. It's fast. That's kind of what I expected from Miami. And, I hate to say it, but for me, Miami's been a little bit disappointing its first 2 years in F1. All that said, Oliver Bearman, an 18-year-old, hopping into a Ferrari with a few hours notice before his first practice session in qualifying, and really doing a great job, coming in the top 10, ahead of two fellow Britons. Pretty impressive. Red Bull again, Max again. It's just dominant.
Hold on. I forgot that Oliver, his name is Oliver, so of course he's British, but I had forgotten that. He doesn't have a seat, but he could next year. You could see. Hold on, Patrick. Let's slight little pit stop here. You could see if Bearman had a seat, let's say next year. George, British. Lando, British. Oliver Bearman, British. Could there be multiple British drivers in F1 better than Lewis Hamilton in F1?
Well, there could be. I think there's an argument to be made that there already are. But, I think time will tell that Lewis, has been the greatest British driver of all time. I don't think that will be surpassed anytime soon, and it seems unfathomable that any of the current drivers on the grid will surpass him in that. He was so good right when he started. He started from a very young age. I think he was 18 when he first got a seat in F1.
I don't know if he was that young, but he was young. I mean, and certainly it's been about 20 years, so you might be right.
Yeah, and he's just been, made good career moves for himself, and obviously had that dominant spell at Mercedes. So, I think at this stage in his career, there are some really talented young British drivers on the grid, and he is, um, you know, pretty consistently compared to them, and fights with them, and I think tends to be in the mix with them. Last year he finished in the standings ahead of all of them, so he
Yeah.
still has it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's they have a very good pool of talent, I guess, in those British Isles
I
there.
guess they really do. And I mean, hey, hats off to Lewis, not only just for being one of the greatest of all time and owning most of the records, but I mean, his career trajectory will be McLaren to Mercedes to Ferrari. That's a pretty good, you know, that's a pretty good career trajectory when you think about it.
Yep.
Yeah, though actually you said, hey, hats off to the British Isles. It's interesting the number of Formula One drivers, their nationalities, and then when you think of like per capita. So we have Oscar and Daniel, that's Australia. So that's like how many people are in Australia? 20 million? I don't know. That's two.
I don't know.
Max is from where, the Netherlands? How many people are there? There's not many people in Europe, I
I
don't
don't
think.
know.
5, 6 million.
Probably like, yeah, maybe.
Well, Botas from Finland.
Yeah. Well, there's
How
been
many
quite a
people?
few Finnish drivers, right? I mean, we
I
used to
know.
have Kimi in the sport, and
Yeah, Kimmy
you
was
get
one of the all-time
Hakkinen.
greats.
Um,
Hakkinen
you
was
know,
great.
there's Finns are fucking good drivers, man. Like,
Maybe it's the snow, uh, avoiding reindeer. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting. Which country per capita produces the most and or best drivers? I didn't mean to get you off track there, Patrick. But what about your? Let me get your top five for before we move on for Saudi Arabia.
yeah, top five. I think everybody typically gives their hats off to the rookie drivers, especially a guy coming in, making his Formula One debut in a Ferrari at 18 years old. Didn't even get the full weekend. Obviously, he was qualifying in F2. He was on pole in F2 and then got brought into F1 in the same weekend. But Ollie Behrman, just did so well. He seemed super composed and drove really, really well in that car. I would have him as my top driver of the day, of the weekend.
Oh yeah,
I don't
and
think it's all that questionable.
and
So
what is the equivalent of that? Like if you're not an F1 driver, I mean, he's 18. Ferrari walks over to him and says, "Hey, can you drive our car in the Formula One race this weekend?" What's the equivalent for an 18-year-old here? I mean, is it like that Taylor Swift girls, helicoptering into your high school for the prom? Like
I mean,
there's not much equal,
it has to be like a high school baseball player, and the Yankees go, "Hey, we need somebody
right?
right now," and
Here's a few million,
you get a couple hits. I don't know. There's nothing that happens.
yeah,
There's very few sporting events in the world that kind of thing can take place. So it's pretty special to see. His weekend, his year has been made, I think, and he did a great job, which is really really cool to see. I was thinking about it actually. It's really fun to see really young, talented drivers driving cars that are competitive. Um, over the last several years, we've seen a lot of young guys come in, whether it be from F2 or Formula E or whatever, and get into cars that are just not competitive. The Haas team, for example, AlphaTauri, the kick Sauber, Alfa Romeo, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
These
AlphaTauri
cars have
should be
been
decent.
have
Yeah.
been slow. Well, Williams
Oh yeah.
especially, these
Oh yeah.
cars have
That's a
been
meat grinder.
slow, and sometimes it can be hard to gauge how good and competitive these young drivers can be in those cars. So, I think it's always fun when we get to see these rookie drivers in competitive cars like Piastri last year in the McLaren. He had a great at least second half of the season, and that was a lot of fun to watch. Behrman here, it's exciting to see what he's capable of. So that's always fun. I guess that was only my top driver of the day. So rounding out the top five, I have Max. Just exceptional performance, and we always the best comparison for any driver is to their teammate. These first two races of the season, he's been miles ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez, who has come in second place. So it's not like Perez is doing anything bad, but Max is just out of this league.
Yeah, I think people are underestimating the fact that when you're as good as Max in a car as good as that Red Bull, he doesn't have to bring his best, but he still does.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be just heartening also for guys who are really really good in a car that's really really good, but just not quite.
Yep. After that, I mentioned him. I have Oscar. Piastri, I thought, had a great race this weekend. He's been showing that he is just as capable as his teammate Lando Norris, who I think most people believe is one of the best young drivers on the grid. And once again, finds himself in the top five. So, really great work from him.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Oscar and Lando because both are great drivers. The McLaren car has promise, and you wonder, will Oscar get a win before Lando? I mean, that's now very possible.
Yeah, definitely. He's been really good. And once again, this weekend was really solid. Was able to hold off Alonso, Russell, all these guys throughout the race. So really great job from him. Then I have Leclerc, good qualifying sessions, good racing. Really the only car or driver that was able to kind of stick close to the one Red Bull and Perez. I mean, Max is just way, way too far ahead of anybody currently.
You wonder if Charles is in sort of that acceptance phase.
Mm-hmm.
The Red Bull is a little bit better than Ferrari. The Red Bull team is a little bit better than the Ferrari team. Max is a little bit better than Charles. It's like when Charles and Ferrari bring their very best, it's still just not quite enough, you wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And like, is he sort of in that acceptance phase?
I mean, yeah, that was kind of signs last week, in Bahrain. Leclerc had some braking issues at the start, so kind of fell back a little bit and really didn't have a chance to compete too much with the Red Bulls. But Sainz, drove up. He drove really, really well, and ended up being a few seconds off of Perez for P2. So he got a podium, which is great to see, but just not quite there. That has to be so tough to swallow. And I think as the season goes on, if that continues to be the case, Ferrari is that team with these drivers where they regularly try to kind of push past the limit a little bit, and that's where they get into trouble. That's when Mercedes starts to creep back into the picture, and McLaren can creep back into the picture and start picking off points from them because they are not quite at the top, but they are so close that they think that they can reach it, and that's when kind of everything starts to go downhill, I think.
Yeah, good point.
So, hopefully they can kind of keep it in line, and if they can reach the top, good. If they're, not quite there, at least pick up P2 in the constructors, I guess that is. But anyways, finally rounding out my top 5, I do have Sergio Perez. I forget who it was, but somebody on the F1 broadcast was saying, Perez has started out this season doing exactly his job, which we have known since he got to Red Bull. Coming in second place is his job. Being the best teammate that he can be, getting the most points for Red Bull that he can. And he has done that the first 2 races of this season. So hats off to him. Good work. There was a lot of speculation coming into the season at the end of last season. Would he remain a Red Bull driver? Because he just did not have a good season last year. And he has kind of proven to everybody, I can fill the role, at least to start this season.
Yeah, so you have Oliver, Max, Oscar, Charles. I agree all with those. Perez is your number 5. I do think people underestimate the pressure Sergio is on, the pressure to deliver, the pressure of being Max's teammate, and being the number 2 guy at Red Bull. I still don't know if I would put him at 5. I think maybe Nico Hulkenberg or Alonso. I think I might put there. But
did well. Alonso did well. There were some really good drives. Magnussen did a great job in his role as a teammate, albeit he crashed into a couple of guys throughout the race. So maybe he shouldn't be given props for that. But there were some really good fun drives. But I just I don't know. I have my top 5. So
yeah. So there you had Oliver there. There are certain markers in a man's life, son. His first kiss, his first time making love, and then of course there's that first time you think to yourself when you get older, I probably should go to the bathroom before I leave the house. But as you get older, you also get joy from certain things, like seeing an 18-year-old getting his first shot in F1 and doing well in a great car, as you mentioned. And it's funny because he got the shot because Carlos Sainz had appendicitis. And last year, wasn't that what got Nick DeVries, or was it last year?
2 years ago, Alex Albon.
Yeah, wasn't it Albon? Yeah, 2 years ago, had appendicitis. Like, hey, Nick, can you fill in? And he did such a great job.
Yeah,
he got a seat, and then he lost his seat, and then they brought Ricardo in, and he got injured, and they
broke his hand.
Yeah. I mean, it's just funny what you'd think an appendicitis in a grown man, that's not going to cause much havoc, but there is quite the domino effect, oddly enough, in Formula One.
Yep.
I don't want to make this the show about Oliver, but I was a little boy. We did not have streaming or internet, satellite television. We did not even have cable television when I was a little boy. I would sit in front of there, and on Saturdays I would watch Wide World of Sports, and thanks to Sir Jackie Stewart, I would see, a few seconds of an F1 race. And that was the last time a driver debuted at Ferrari. Like their
F1 debut. Made their F1 debut.
I mean, which I thought was, I had to verify that stat was correct. I thought, wait, I'm old. That was the 70s. In America, like I said, you would catch a few seconds on Wide World of Sports. That can't possibly be true, but it's true. And I mean, I don't know. I just thought that just seemed, kind of a remarkable coincidence. And, it's tough getting old. I mean, here I am checking out Logan's mom. Next thing I realized, man, there's a driver on F1 who I'm older than his dad. Speaking of dads, Lance Stroll's dad, I think, needs to have a heart-to-heart. I'm just not sure Lance Stroll. I mean, I think he's the best of the daddy drivers on the grid, but I also think he should be the last of the daddy drivers. the sport has gotten so much more money, so much more professionalized. There's all these corporations and private equity firms, and I think the day of the daddy drivers has come to an end. And I think Stroll is he's just not getting it done. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think so long as Lawrence Stroll owns that team, I think Lance Stroll is a driver for that team. I don't think that he necessarily deserves a seat in F1, but it's F1 is not fair. There's 20 drivers on the grid, and several of them are really only there because they have sponsorships or rich parents or whatever it may be. And so they're bringing money to the team, or their dad owns the team, or sponsoring the team. And that is the way that the sport is currently. I mean, it's quite frankly how a lot of American sports are. If you got money, if you can bring in money to the team, you can be on it. And I would love to see somebody else in that car, somebody who can really drive the wheels off of it. Next to Alonso, because that is potentially a very fun, very exciting team and car. But Stroll, last year was way behind Alonso, and really the reason that Aston did not come P4 in the constructors. And this year, Alonso is proving that car is still pretty quick. It can get around a track. And Stroll, a few laps into this race, ends up in the wall. Turns in too hard, clips his wheel, breaks his suspension, and goes head first into a wall. That's tough to see. And I agree with you. I think it would be really nice, I think, a change of pace to see someone more fitting in that car. And really, I think it would make the team more competitive. But, dads, I guess, have a soft spot for their children. And I don't think Lawrence Stroll wants to be running that team if his son is not a part of it.
Switching to the soft compound, Max Verstappen. He already has 100 podiums. I believe the next youngest to reach 100 podiums was Sebastian Vettel, and he was in his 30s. I mean, it seems likely that Max will get his 4th driver championship this year. It seems likely that it might be even easier than last year. Do we blame the regulations, Patrick? Or is it the regulations and the spending cap? Or is it, the regulations and the spending cap and all the new money coming in, putting things in flux? And so, if you sort of locked in your design and you had a great driver, a great team, and you locked in your car, I mean, there's not much more you can do. Maybe that's a flaw. I mean, Mercedes was dominant for so many years, but there was no spending cap back then. But really, only Red Bull and Ferrari could throw anywhere close to the amount of money that Mercedes was putting in. And Mercedes had an engine that was just simply radically superior. It took years and years and years of just spending, ungodly amounts of money to just get near them. I'm not sure there's a workaround here. We like the idea of different designs, different power unit manufacturer. I mean, We don't want this to be IndyCar. We don't want this to be NASCAR. I don't know. What do you think of the regulations, the spending cap? Is there any real potential for these other guys in the next couple of years?
It's very interesting, right? Because it seems like, from an outside perspective, that these teams, they had a design, and they had sort of this concept for what their car was going to look like, how it was going to perform, and sort of designed around uh, their specs, their targets. And then, they come out and they go, oh shit, Red Bull is like really, really fast. They are dominant in a straight line, and they have just as much downforce in the high speed, mid speed, low corners. Like, how do we attack them? Where do we gain time on them? And so it's been this sort of game for all these other teams to kind of catch up and figure out, all right, what's going to have the biggest impact on our car. And I just don't think there's enough time or resources or manpower for these teams to kind of completely overhaul pieces of their car, their entire car. It's not really possible. So they are doing, I think, the best that they can to make these design adjustments, or setup adjustments, improve their power units, whatever it may be, to inch closer. And it kind of seems like Mercedes and Ferrari and McLaren have gotten a little bit closer to Red Bull, but they're still quite a ways off.
Yeah.
I just don't think that until there's, all the teams have to do a complete redesign based on, that, let's say that the 2026 regulation changes, that, anybody really has, or anybody is really going to get all that much closer to Red Bull. I
Yeah.
just don't think there's enough time or money or people, regardless of how, smart, brilliant engineers you have. Like, you have to look at, okay, that's a great design. This will bring us, 3-4 seconds closer, over the course of a race to Red Bull, or, a tenth, 2/10 a lap closer to Red Bull. But we can't manufacture that right now. We don't have the money to do that. We don't have, the cost cap is not allowing us to do that, or we don't have the time to find, someone who can manufacture this part, or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, I've been a big believer in the spending cap. I believe it creates competitive equity like we see in the NFL. I believe it increases the value of the sport, which then will allow them to make it even better. But the combination of a salary cap and regulations that, even though the same regulations apply to everyone, they're not always equally applied. It's going to make this difficult. I liken Max Verstappen to Michael Jordan, and the combination of talent and sort of relentless competitiveness sets him apart from even the other very best drivers in the world. And Christian Horner, in my opinion, is the best team principal. Adrian Newey, the best designer. Red Bull has the best team. And there's a spending cap. It's like if you brought in Michael Jordan and the best coach, and that team had the best players. And then at that moment, it's like, okay, we're locking in a spending cap, there really isn't much opportunity. I just think time in hubris, which we're seeing a lot of that happen at Red Bull. There's hubris is sort of run amok inside Red Bull all of a sudden. But otherwise, I think it's just time. It's like, look, this is Michael Jordan, and he has the best people around him, and no one else can spend any more money to bring in any more talent. You just have to wait this out. He's just going to win everything. That's kind of my view. And I mean, look, Red Bull is now. I mean, speaking of hubris, you think Christian Horner, team principal at Red Bull, but look at what the man has done. Red Bull has now surpassed Williams, the all-time winningest teams in Formula One history. Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull. That's him, which I just think is remarkable. Speaking of Christian Horner and Red Bull, do we want to talk about that? Any thoughts on all the craziness that's happening there where he's going to get fired? No. It's Helmut going to get fired? No. Max is going to leave. Max's father's making waves. I mean, I love the drama, and I also love the fact that, in my opinion, there's no way Red Bull and Max lose, at least through into 2026, outside of just, stupid man behavior.
Yeah, that's probably true. The whole Red Bull drama thing is kind of crazy. It's pretty much all he said, she said, and a whole bunch of media outlets jumping on it, and you have no idea what actually is going on. Red Bull are kind of trying to keep everything hush hush. Helmut and Jos are kind of the only two that are like, oh, we don't really give a fuck about anything. So we're just going to like talk shit for, no reason. Or maybe there's a reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just weird, ridiculous craziness, I think, that's going on and surrounding Red Bull. And I have no idea how it started, who started it, or maybe why they started it. It almost seems like, somebody from outside Red Bull like just wanted to take them down and is trying to start shit. I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
I can absolutely believe Christian Horner would do what he's been accused of. Not that I think he has, but I could believe it. But right now, the only people talking are people who hate Max and hate Christian Horner and hate Red Bull and want to see them fail. And that's not a reliable source. They could be correct, but that's not a reliable source. Speaking of reliable sources, though, we do know Audi in 2026. This is nice. They're going to buy Sauber, which runs the Alfa Romeo team. And I think that's going to be good. We're getting another. I mean, Audi makes great cars. They're an actual car manufacturer that you and I could buy their cars. And they're getting into the sport completely. Not just a brand name. They're going to buy a team. Yeah, I really like that. But
full takeover is good.
Yeah, maybe that's what the Andretti folks need to do. Is like, look, you're not. No matter what we do, no matter how much money we pony up, you're not going to let us in because we're American and you're provincial Europeans and you're greedy. Maybe if they come in with some GM backing, some private money backing, it's like, hey, Gene Haas, here's $2 billion. Would that work? That could work.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what once their application was denied unceremoniously, I kind of expected them to, the Andretti group to have, the realization like, this is a closed doors sport. They don't allow outsiders into it. So the only way you're going to get in is if you just buy a team that's already in. And I think the most obvious choice currently is that Haas team. And so I see that as like a very likely thing to happen. I would not be surprised if we found out that 2026 or 2028, whenever it's going to be, that the Andretti Group is not a new team to the grid, but is a takeover of a current team.
All right. Ask the Steward segment. Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Start of the race. Everyone said Lando jumped. The steward said, no, not really. Did he jump? It seemed like he jumped.
Well, from the video, he did. But according to the actual rule, he did not. So, basically, there's some sort of transponder that stewards look at, says, did they jump the start or did they not jump the start? The vehicle tells them. And it said, no. I don't know exactly, what it's transmitting, but it said there was no jump start. So they were like, all right, well, according to the rules, he didn't jump the start. So I don't know. That seems like open and shut to me.
Yeah. What about Ricardo? Folks love Ricardo.
He's bad,
he kind of fell off. He had a steep drop. I mean, you're looking at what Lewis is doing in his late 30s, what Fernando is doing in his 40s. Daniel Ricciardo has had a bit of a drop. From Red Bull to Alpine, Renault, McLaren, he was out. Now he's at Alfa Romeo, and a lot of folks were saying, "Oh, if Sergio doesn't deliver, they'll move Daniel into that spot." I'm not even sure Daniel's going to survive a year at AlphaTauri. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Yuki currently is a better driver than Daniel Ricciardo is. I think a lot of people would really be bothered by me saying that, but currently he is. And I was surprised last year I wasn't that surprised when they booted De Vries, but I was a little bit surprised that they booted him in favor of Ricciardo. And then he didn't really prove anything last year. And he's been poor this year. Yuki drove better this weekend. He drove better in Bahrain, but, was some controversial team opinions and weird, naughty acts after the race. But, I think Yuki has been better than Ricciardo to start this season. I don't see any reason for Ricciardo to stay in F1, aside from the fact that, he's sort of this fan favorite. And like we mentioned earlier with daddy drivers, that actually goes a long way. If people really like you, and they're supporting, your team because of it, that's a big deal. So I think that's the only reason really he's currently driving in F1, is because he's likable.
What about Lewis Hamilton? He deserves his spot, and he's doing well. But he spent the past 2 years, while George was hanging out partying with his hot girlfriend and with Fernando Alonso, Lewis was putting in the work. He was there in where are they? Milton Keynes, I think. And having Mercedes fix the car, he had a lot of very specific requirements, and he was quite public about it. Where the seat, the flooring,
the wing,
but I don't know. I mean, he just signed that huge deal with Ferrari for next year. The car isn't performing as well as he hoped. It may be, given how proven Mercedes is at bringing upgrades, it may be that they wind up for this season having the second best car. But when you look at it now, it's the third best car, quite possibly fourth. Yep. Do you think he's checked out? I mean,
Yeah.
George looks like he's having an easier time with that car, and it's not a great car.
Yeah, I don't think Lewis cares. I think he's like, look, this is a throwaway season for me. I think had the car been reasonably competitive with, Red Bull, he would be fighting pretty hard, but he doesn't seem to be all that interested in kind of really battling. I think it'll be like a less I don't know. I don't want to say tumultuous year at Mercedes, but I just don't think he will be as outspoken about the sort of woes of the vehicle as he has been the last couple of seasons. I think he has been sort of trying to improve the car, and I get that there's only so much that Mercedes can do, but I don't know how much they've actually improved the things that he has been complaining about for several years now. And I think, he's just kind of over it. Like, look, like I'm trying to give my feedback and what I actually feel in the car, and, improve it for how I want to drive. And it hasn't really been done. And so he's not super, he just doesn't seem interested in really racing for them anymore.
Yeah, I think as great a driver as he is, Lewis Hamilton is also very good, very astute at knowing when to jump, where to put himself, when not to fight. And I think this is a year of when not to fight. Yeah. And he knows that. But let me throw out something controversial. Two things. Do you think Ferrari has regrets? I mean, they're going to pay him 50, 60 million. Meanwhile, Mercedes, his current team, has a kid, an Antonelli kid.
Mm-hmm.
Ferrari, Lewis's future team, has a kid, Oliver Bearman. These guys are like the future of F1. Lewis Hamilton, for all his greatness, is not. So do you think there's any regrets there?
I don't think so. I think that, well, we can get to it, but I think Fred Vasseur, team principal at Ferrari, has a vision, and I think Hamilton fits into that vision exactly as he sees it. And I think there will be time for Ferrari to bring up Bearman. That probably won't be next year unless, they can get him into another team, say the Sauber team or the Haas team. I do believe Bearman will get his chance. He's been a really good F2 driver and obviously proved himself that he's very capable in F1. But I think for next season, like, Vasseur has this goal, and he believes that Hamilton fits into that really well. And, I think Vasseur is not... he's not like your prototypical Ferrari team boss. I think he has identified Ferrari's weaknesses, and he is working to improve them, mostly just by poaching the right people. There's been some talk that there are, I think the Mercedes young driver development boss is jumping ship, moving to Ferrari with Hamilton. There have been lots of rumors swirling around Adrian Newey going to Ferrari.
Wow.
The top engineers say in Red Bull moving to Ferrari. These are rumors, I know, but I think that Vasseur is not afraid of attacking other teams, taking their talent, and making Ferrari better. And that is not something that is typical of Ferrari. They think, we can accomplish anything. We don't need to, take from others. Like we're Ferrari, right? We can do it. I think Vasseur's like, fuck that. These people are winning. We are going to bring in the winners. It's like a very Christian Horner attitude, I feel like. But it seems like that is kind of the approach that he's taking. And I think, for one, that will make Ferrari a much better, more competitive team if he can pull it off.
Across the line, that's where we choose our top 5 for the next race. The next race is in 2 weeks in Melbourne. Home race for Oscar and Daniel. If we choose a driver correctly, that's 1 point. If we get them in the exact right spot where they finish, that's 3 points. When we take a driver, he is off the board. That is how we do across the line, and that is the best ever. I think that was my best ever explanation of how across the line works.
Explanation.
All right. So what are the current standings, Patrick?
Okay, current standings. We've only got one across the line under our belts so far this season. I currently have the advantage, 3 points to 2.
Okay. All right. So for Australia, who goes first?
You have first pick.
Oh, okay. And that's in 2 weeks. Carlos Sainz is a healthy young man. I don't know how long it takes to. I had my appendicitis removed when I was a not healthy and not young man. And I was, I think, back in the office the next day. Do we know if he's going to be racing next in 2 weeks?
They suggested that he will be available to race in Australia.
Okay. Then if I go first, I mean, will Max equal his record, the F1 record of 10 wins in a row? I say yes. So I pick Max Verstappen.
Wow. Risky pick.
I know. I put it all on the line there.
I think there's only 2 drivers that are, well, I guess 3 drivers currently competing for 2nd through 4th place, seems like right now. So I'll go Ferrari, Leclerc, P1.
That would be awesome. Charles needs a win.
Closely followed by, after getting passed on the final lap, Sergio Perez.
Oh, okay. I just thought that people say, oh, well, Lewis hasn't won a race in 2 years. You know what? Neither is Charles. I mean, Max plus Red Bull.
True,
that
like
makes
Austria
it,
or something. A couple years ago.
I mean, this is damn near impossible. Okay, so you have Charles and Sergio. I'm going to go with. So this race we had 5, the top 6 positions were filled by 5 teams. That was pretty good. So 2 Red Bull, we had McLaren, we had Ferrari, we had Mercedes. Right? So it was Max,
didn't they
Sergio.
Also, and was Alonso? I don't remember, actually.
Yeah. And Aston. Yeah, so right. Yeah. So we had Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Mercedes, and Aston. I think all were in there. So outside of the Max factor, it's kind of competitive. Mm-hmm. So I have Max at number 1. At number 2, I'm going to pick George. he's been complaining about that car, but he's a great racer, and I have faith still in Mercedes. And just nipping at him will be Charles's fully recovered teammate, Carlos Sainz.
Just in case I won't have Sainz, I'll just put Ferrari teammate. There we go.
Ah, okay, that's good. Yes. Let's make it fair, right?
Let's see. Okay, P3. You have Sainz and Russell. You know, I'm gonna go with the home race in that nice orange McLaren. I'll go Piastri on the podium.
That would be awesome.
Ooh. And then, great racer, not having an exciting year. I think he doesn't care too much about this year. Looking forward to next year. I'm taking Lewis Hamilton P4 though. He'll have a solid race.
Okay. Then I am going to pick Lando McLaren at 4 and Alonso. So very, very similar. Yeah. So I've got Max, George, Carlos, Lando, and Fernando. And you have Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Oscar Piastri, the Australian, Lewis Hamilton, the Brit, and in 5th place, Patrick?
That is an interesting question. I am going to go with, what's a team that's been moderately competitive? You know what? I'll take something weird happening, and Alex Albon gets himself into the top 5.
That would be nice. I think listeners will note we have nobody from Alpine. As we have been telling you, Alpine is garbage. I mean, in our Effie's Awards episode, we tried to make the case that they were even worse than Haas. We couldn't, but we came close. And
This
they could be
season
worse
so
than
far,
Haas this
they
year.
are worse than Haas.
I know. My goodness. Okay, crazy prediction, Patrick. Wait, before we do crazy prediction, how about just predictions? Like, Lewis is leaving Mercedes this year, at the end of this year. Who do you think will be George's teammate?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the fun things over the last couple of weeks, right? Has been sort of everybody giving their 2 cents, their predictions on what the 2025 driver lineup might look like. People are saying, oh God, Max might jump ship and go to Mercedes alongside George Russell. Wouldn't that be crazy? What if Alonso went to Red Bull? These kind of crazy things. I don't know if there's going to be any more crazy things that happen. I think Sainz probably fills the Mercedes role. That's my prediction. I think it would be hard for a team with an open seat to pass up Carlos Sainz. So that's why I'm just thinking right away, Mercedes is going to grab that one.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sainz is a quality driver. George Russell, Carlos Sainz is a good team. I also think, we love the story of like Oliver Behrman, Liam Lawson stepping in, the young guy, or maybe we want, Mercedes, they should bring in their young driver, Antonelli. But, there's a spending cap. These cars are super difficult. Being an F1 driver is super difficult. A known commodity is almost priceless. So I don't think they're going to reach down and pull up a new young driver. I'm with you. I think it's Carlos Sainz as well. Do you think Gunther will be back? Remember we said he should be fired and that Netflix should give him a job like as kind of a travel host, just sort of being ridiculous, traveling around the world. I would watch that, I believe. But there's so much money flowing into F1. Sponsors wanting to get into F1. And, Gunther's a wheeler dealer. So I don't know. Do we think he'll be back?
I don't see any reason for Gunther to be back in F1. It may be possible. One of these kind of lowly teams might want a Gunther to come in and kind of I don't know, try to get some sponsorships or try to right the ship a little bit. It seems very possible that like an Alpine would reach out to Gunther, but I don't think I see it happening. I think that ship has sailed. So
Okay. Now, crazy prediction. You skirted around my crazy prediction, and here it is. Christian Horner gets fired from Red Bull because he's a naughty boy. Mercedes team principal, but also co-owner Toto Wolff, he just isn't getting the job done at Mercedes, and he knows it. He steps aside. He hires Christian Horner, team principal. Greatest team principal in F1 history, now at Mercedes. The two work together and bring Max over to Mercedes. They then dominate from 25 through at least 2030. Max has I don't know, count that up. Is that 9 world championships, 10? I don't know. But all three just become absolute F1 legends. Toto Wolff, Christian Horner, Max Verstappen. Crazy, but it just might work.
As if they're not already F1 legends. All three of them have been so dominant in these different eras. It's been really, really impressive to see what each of them has accomplished. Mount Rushmore of F1, that's going to be hard. You're going to have a hard time, I think, putting a Toto or a Horner in that, just based on some of the drivers that have been involved in the sport, but or guys like Frank Williams or Bernie Ecclestone or these right. You have Schumacher and Senna and there's just there's so many people you can look at it. It would
right.
be hard to make.
I don't know if non-Americans know what Mount Rushmore is, but yeah, I think we'd have to have a driver's one and a non-driver's, or at least they were principally a driver. So you could have a Bernie Ecclestone, obviously, and Frank Williams,
a Ross Brawn,
Christian, Ross Brawn, Adrian Newey. We've already surpassed it. We're gonna have a few Mounts Rushmore, as they would say in France.
I think mine I kind of touched on already is Ferrari poaches all of the top talent from Mercedes and Red Bull, engineers, drivers, management, bosses, these kinds of guys, and creates a super team, and they are back on top. Ferrari, who would have thunk it?
I love that one. I also just love the idea in a spending cap era. So it's not like, you could just throw money at all these guys, at an engineer, at someone in the pit crew. You've got to be careful with it. And so you just sort of wonder where people gravitate. It's sort of like, wait a second, I want to be with winners. Okay, who right now seems to have put together a winning team? Or wait, I want a team that's much more family oriented. No, I want we're just badass lads. We're traveling the motherfucking planet, and we're in F1, and we're swinging the big dick, and we're having a good time, and we're winning. And then you've got the guys where it's like, no, maybe they'll pay me the most, or there's the biggest opportunity. But no one really has a trump card except for Ferrari. That's the one team where it's like, oh wait, Ferrari is calling. Hold on, I have to take this call.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be right. We could see this happen, Patrick. So I think your crazy prediction actually could work. All right. I want to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved Father and Son F1 podcast. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.